in the next day or two to view the recording or to advise colleagues that this, if they have missed it, that this is available for them to view. So again, without further ado, we will introduce Kevin, who became VSI's CEO in July of 2021. And Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and your remarks, and then to Steve Nelson, and then after that, we will have a Q&A session with the attendees. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Terry. Okay, so hello, everyone. I'm the new CEO. I'm not an ex-DEC person, but I do have an enterprise software background and a cloud background and a general technology background. So what I'm going to go through, like just a quick update about where VSI is heading in general and what I've been doing for the first 6-8 months or so of being at VSI. What I have been doing is having many customer conversations and listening and learning. And I'll give some quick summaries here in the next couple of slides. In general, these are conversations about OpenVMS and enterprise IT and OpenVMS applications. And the change rate of each of those is going faster and faster and faster. So the pressure on OpenVMS and OpenVMS applications, it's the same pressures as the rest of the computing stack. So customers, us included, need to do more every year and do more faster. And that trend is not going to change. We are in the final stages of moving to x86. x86, I know we talk about x86. x86 is just an instruction set. So there's nothing that is inherently interesting in just an instruction set, but this really does, we've kind of codified that into saying this x86 represents a variety of new platforms and homes for OpenVMS and OpenVMS applications, and a bunch of new opportunities for OpenVMS applications. So there's a lot of new things coming, and hopefully a lot of new things coming faster. And my goal here is to help VSI and VSI customers through this pivot into the future. Next slide, Steve. Okay, so what I'm hearing from customers. So number one, that's why we're all here, right? When will x86 be out? So this is not a grand finish line where VSI and OpenVMS that we're just going to cross over and we're done and it's out. The OS is reaching enterprise level quality, but again, there's not much you can do with just an operating system. So it's about the availability of compilers and the stack and the applications and everything else that we need on OpenVMS. So in my talking and listening, and my response to this question is really recommending customers start planning their implementations of x86. And you'll get more information, I think, later in this about where we are, and you can start thinking and talking and planning internally for your own moves to x86. If you aren't sure about how to start or what this means, we'd be more than happy. So just reach out to us. But really, this is kind of to summarize, x86 release is not a binary event where we're going to say it's done, go. It's all about looking about where your application is, and as different parts that you need and different compilers and everything else need are available, moving your applications into x86. The other thing I'll hear very often is, can you add X to the roadmap? X is mostly hardware. It's servers, controllers, new devices. I hear the DL380 is too big, it's too small. I don't have any really great answers here outside of just saying VSI is just one company, and we're doing our best to service the most number of customers. But obviously, we still want to hear those requests that you want OpenVMS to do X. So we still want to hear all of this. A big one that I'm really hearing a lot about is compliance, security support. There's a lot in there. I know we all enjoy the stability and security of the platform, but the world and the security space is changing. So just to exist as a software company or as a company, we all have new and uplifting security requirements. So it's no longer possible just to leave an application untouched, unupdated, unwatched. There's new and changing requirements for all of us. So this is towards the top of the list of many of our customers today, and this trend is going to continue. And we all need to be ready because we have not all filled out our final compliance checklists yet. And there's going to new one that's going to appear tomorrow and next week. So we just have to keep watching this. But lots and lots of conversations about compliance and security. So what I have heard is our application stacks or the rest of the company is going virtual, or they're going to cloud, or they're going to certain hypervisors. So, but in general, IT and processing is virtualizing more and more, and or moving to a hypervisor platform. So many of our largest customers are moving to hypervisors. We're hearing requests for specific hypervisors. And we're also having discussions with customers about what moving their OpenVMS application into a hypervisor environment means, in both challenges and opportunities. It's just getting to be a really interesting world. Next slide, Steve. So related to that last question and comment and conversations that I and we have had with customers, some people may have seen that announcement last week, but we're pushing to a hypervisor first roadmap. With this, we think we can improve time to market and increase the pace of updates for OpenVMS customers. And really, we all work here. We all like OpenVMS, and we enjoy all the things and the stability and the security and all the things that it brings to us. But it's the applications that are important. So that's really where this move is coming from, is being able to more service the applications and service the increasing pace of change for where we're headed. But this is entirely educated from customer feedbacks. And going forward, obviously, we're still looking for feedback. So Steve's going to jump in the next slide here and give a lot more detail, but obviously, we're always looking for feedback about what we're doing. And that's roughly it. So thanks to everyone who's going to be a warm welcome at VSI, and more good things to come. And I think the rest of the show is Steve here.
Sure is, Kevin. First of all, I just wanted to shout out, and I just saw a couple of previous folks I used to work with, Stanley Quayle, who he and I basically had a bunch of conversions at one point in time of my Alpha machines over to some Stromasys, and also Michael Kerr, who I used to work with in the 1032, both VAX and Alpha community way back when. So how are you, folks? Good to see you. So let's get started. The VMS software updates for May of 2022. So basically, the agenda is going to be a little bit of introduction as to what's going on, timeline reviews, 9.2 review overviews, look ahead, summaries, and of course, questions and comments after this. So let's start with currently OpenVMS V9.2 for x86, which is again a limited production. I know I mentioned this in previous webinars, which will be basically released as of July 2022. The reason why we're calling it a limited production release is because not all compilers will be available, such as COBOL and Pascal, BASIC, etc. However, you still have cross compilers, and if you are in the middle of actually converting some of your applications over, right now those cross compilers will work just fine as well. But a lot of our customers are starting to look at some of our native compilers, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. So major milestones for us is basically supporting enterprise, VMware, ESXi, and of course KVM environments. KVM environments can be anywhere from an enterprise Red Hat to CentOS to Ubuntu to whatever environment that you see fit as far as the KVM is concerned. The virtual environment will support a wide range of hardware. So in other words, as long as you have an Intel-based system, and you have one of these hypervisors on there, you should be fine. We also want to put a little bit out for Virtualbox. We use Virtualbox heavily, especially for some of our development here at VSI. And we do have planned support for Hyper-V at some point. We're just learning a little bit more about that recently, and it has a completely different API than what is supported with VMware and KVM as far as our virtual I/O scheme. And of course, we've been focusing a lot on cluster support, clusters over IP. We're working heavily on compilers, layered products, and of course, open source. And we still have lots more to do. But that hasn't been all of our focus. We've been focusing also on creating new TCP/IP versions for Alpha and Itanium. Everything's pretty much in beta at this point. Alpha will be coming out soon. We have OpenSSH, which has been out in beta as well, and that's going to be available for x86, Itanium, and Alpha. And we have several other layered products, which I'll get into in subsequent slides going forward, and various packages and patches for both the Alpha and Itanium for versions, other versions of the operating systems that we have. So a little bit of time review. I'm sure some of you have seen this before. I was maybe falling asleep at this point, but ultimately we've done quite a bit since the first half of 2020, and ultimately we did release in the April timeframe an E9.2 field test. Some of you may or may not have seen it. And then ultimately our limited production release will be in July of 2022. We're a few months behind because we're running into some issues with some of our storage drivers. So we want to make sure that what goes out the door is actually a solid, in a solid state. So a quick 9.2 overview. When you get 9.2, it'll be basically an ISO installation. So you'll receive an ISO. It'll come with TCP/IP 6.0 services. There'll be some cross compiler updates. And yes, we actually will have macro and bliss available. We're actually working on DEX-C, which is about 70% complete, but what we'll be doing is going field test. It will not be included in the actual operating system. The same goes with C++. C++ is currently in early field test. We have a select couple of customers, such as Oracle, out there actually beta testing the latest and greatest. C++, DEX-C is actually going to be out at some point within the next few months. We'll be looking for customers to actually field test that as well. So we make sure that we have a solid system. And of course, everything's based on our new LLVM implementation. We'll have basically more layered source products and open source products as well, which I'll show you. An updated security server, assorted general improvements and bug fixes, more documentation updates, and I'd also like to invite all of you to come visit our new document site that has a search engine to it. So you can actually search for what you're looking for, whether it's ABS, whether it's TCP/IP, ACMS, whatever. You can actually search on it now. So feel free to, at any point in time, to come to that website and take a look around. We will be doing a lot more with that website as time goes on. And so it's going to be basically a place to come and find out a lot of good information. For 9.2 and beyond, these are the layered products that are basically available. Since 9.1 and of course 9.2, we've had quite a few things, and even before that for the 9.0, we've had quite a few things going forward. Excuse me. As some of you can see down below here, user mode debugger will also be available for 9.2, which is a good thing. And we should be starting to punch out a few more native compilers from the July and August timeframe. And we're looking forward to getting some of those out the door for others to test and to use. And then ultimately we can claim victory for our production environments. Some of the open source products. These are currently the open source products that will be available, and then a few others for 9.2. Excuse me. That would include both OpenSSH 8 and 9, and of course Samba. Forward for 9.2.1 or 9.2x. After 9.2 goes out the door, these also will be available, because ultimately a lot of these require, especially the OpenJDK, require the C++ compiler and a complete library of deck windows as well in order to use some of these functions, because some of it actually has GUI graphical interfaces around it. So once we get the OpenJDK, a lot of these things, such as Tomcat, will fall into place, including Access 2, and some of the other products you can see here. A little bit of look ahead, what's coming down the pike. We'll be looking at additional virtual machine and cloud environments, interact with cloud-based services, looking at more programming languages such as COBOL, Pascal, Fortran. Going forward, a lot more development tools, more open source products and tool sets, and of course, more services and solutions for you as a customer. So, in summary, the VSI team has been very busy over the last several months, and we still have plenty to do. In April, we released E9.2, so basically our field test version for customers to start trying out. This May, we'll actually have our first V9 candidate release at the end of this month. And hopefully that basically will be the point of when we do a code freezes and get everything out in a timely fashion in July. We haven't been exclusively focusing. We've been doing open source updates, new products, product enhancements, services, and of course, we're always thinking beyond what 9.2 is going to be going forward. And if you ever want to see what else may be going on, you can always take a look at our news website, and feel free to reach out at any point in time. Okay, Terry, let's start questions. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, I was, of course, on mute. Kevin, thank you. And Steve, thank you very much. Steve, just one quick item, and I want to remind those who are attending, as we're going to go into the question and answer phase of the webinar, please go ahead and send your questions over either in the chat box or the Q&A box that you can access. And we'll start those in just a minute. But I just wanted to offer a reminder that since 9.2, the field test kit is available to all VSI customers on support who have support contracts. If you've not done that yet and you'd like to do so, please contact VSI support. We also recognize that there are customers, OpenVMS users rather, who are not necessarily VSI customers at this point, but are pointed towards x86. And so if that's the case and you'd like to become involved in the 9.2 field test kit, just please send an email to info@vmssoftware.com or contact a member of the VSI sales team at sales@vmssoftware.com. And they can discuss that with you and get you going on the field test kit, and also the opportunity to do some work using cross-tool compilers. So please, it's certainly not too late to do that, so take advantage of the opportunity. And we appreciate the long list of customers who are already engaged in the field test kit, and we appreciate their feedback. Steve, I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention specific about that at this point?
As far as the field test is concerned, Terry?
Yeah.
Sure. We're always looking for field testers. We actually have a beta test plan that if you would like to be part of especially the TCP/IP portion, if you'd like to be part of that for both alpha and integrity, feel free to send that information via info or basically sales and or actually in support. You can also talk with the support team about becoming a beta tester for us, or basically a field tester for us. We're always looking for customers to help in the testing. We have certain testing requirements as well, what we have, but of course it's not what a full production environment or heavily used production environment would actually go through. We go through a lot of different things and transaction based, and we really compound on the actual operating system. However, it's not a production environment. So we were always looking forward to people jumping on board and giving us a hand as well. So feel free at any point in time to reach out and say you would like to be part of that. We have both TCP/IP version 6 out there, as well as OpenSSH. So in any other type of testing that you would like to be part of, it would be great.
Thank you, Steve. We've got a few questions coming in, so let's just get started with these. I see a couple about whether or not the presentation of this that were taking place by both Kevin and Steve will be available after the session. Yes, again, it takes approximately 24 to possibly as late as 48 hours for those to be available. They will be on our website, not only the presentations, but the recorded webinar. So let's get started. Let's see here. Sorry, there's a flood of them coming in. Okay, here's a question about Fortran, and if we have a specific planned date at this point, or where does that stand in the pecking order in terms of compiler, native compiler availability? Steve, do you want to?
Sure. Once actually C and C++ are done, the other compilers should follow fairly straightforward. In other words, within probably the next 6 months. So I'm hopeful that we don't run into any issues. Some of the issues that we've been running into right now have been basically 32 and 64-bit issues. But once we release the operating system, stay tuned as far as what's going out the door between, I'd say, August and October, November timeframe. We should have things moving fairly quickly. My compiler team basically had mentioned that once C and C++ are done, which are probably the biggest stack of all of them, the other ones should go fairly smoothly, such as COBOL, Fortran, Pascal, etc. So just I watch right after our release and see what gets released. If you would like to be a Fortran beta tester, feel free to reach out to support and just ask them to be added to the list. And we can be added, we can add those to the list and get people out to test. The more people, like I said, the more people we have, the better off we are.
Steve, you mentioned some of the compilers. I'm not sure you mentioned BASIC, but does BASIC fall into that probable same time period?
Excuse me, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. From Steve, is there a chance of SSL1 released prior to SSL 111 will be a part of version 9.2.x?
Unfortunately, Steve, no. Because of the fact that SSL1 is no longer supported, we've had to move forward as well and make changes to not only our TCP/IP stack, but to OpenSSH as well. There's a big jump between 1.0 and 111. As a matter of fact, we're in the middle of right now coming out with SSL 3.0. The work is going a little bit slower. And also, too, we'll be adding a new entropy engine that will comply a lot more with algorithms and hash algorithms that we have going in the operating system itself. So unfortunately, no. It'll be 111, which I believe is actually installed on the system as well. So again, we had to make that change to a lot of the network stack and unfortunately came with that. So.
Thanks, Steve.
Mhm.
From Ron, can you say anything about where Oracle is with RDB on x86? I'll just make a short comment, and then Steve or Kevin, you may want to address this. Certainly, as I think attendees to these webinars know from previous webinars and previous statements made, we continue to have a very close relationship with Oracle from all aspects, and that includes engineering. But having said that, you did reference Oracle earlier. Steve, do you want to comment on that question? And Kevin, if you'd
Sure.
like to chime in as well.
At last, one of the biggest things that Oracle needs is C++ in order to compile a lot of their engine components. So that's ultimately what we've been working with them as well. That's why they become an early beta tester for the C++. When last we had a meeting, which we usually have quarterly meetings with them, they actually had bits and pieces up and running, but I couldn't quote you on those different pieces. So they are actively working on that, and hopefully we'll see something around at the time we release. But as long as they've got a strong C++ compiler, they'd be able to work on things. So I know the compiler team is working with them directly. So just to give you a heads up, but we're actively working with them to make sure that they can compile and do everything they need to do for x86. So.
And I think, and we certainly recognize that many OpenVMS users are Oracle users. So maybe before the next webinar, the timing will be such that Steve, maybe another one of your regular engineering meetings happens with Oracle, and we can gather some of that feedback and ask if they are okay with us making a statement, as opposed to just going to Oracle directly. So thank you. From James, any plans to work or engage with Dynatrace for APM monitoring, especially as OpenVMS moves into the cloud and microservices space with Hyper-V?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I couldn't answer that for you right now. However, if it's something that a customer base is looking for, just let us know, and we'll see what we can do as well.
Again, a great way to do that is to send us an email at info@vmssoftware.com. From Lauren, when will VMS support Unicode, specifically UTF-8 encoding?
Oh, that's a good question. That's something I can't answer right now, but let me look into it.
Okay. From Christian, will the upcoming release of a production-ready 9.x version, are there some news on the Hobbyist program? I'll comment on that quickly, and if anyone else wants to chime in. Obviously, our top priority is to get out a limited production release of 9.2, and then a full production release of 9.2-1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So after that last et cetera is done is probably the time when you would see a 9.x version in a Hobbyist program. Ken has a question. Will there be further field test versions after 9.2?
No, we should be going straight from 9.2 to 9.2.1, and then whatever subsequent releases we do after that. Because ultimately, our biggest issue right now is basically coming out with a solid version for production, and as well as subsequent releases or updates to that to bring you to the next release, which will be V9.2.1. And any type of patches that we can apply using PCSI or any other the mechanisms that we need. But a lot of those would be easily acquired through our portal that we have and be able to download and install appropriately.
Thank you, Steve. From Greg, has the requirement to have a VMware serial console, which only exists with Enterprise ESXi, been addressed?
It has not yet. We are looking at some of their virtual IO API to see if we can bring that to a USB serial connection. So that's something that basically the team has been working on and trying to figure out what is the best approach for that. So it's unfortunate that VMware doesn't allow you to support it on standard editions, just simply give me a COM1 port, but it doesn't, unfortunately. So it has been discussed. We have been looking into different options, and we also been discussing with VMware as well.
Steve, this next question, I think you touched on this certainly, but let's. The question is, when will TCP/IP services integrate SSH instead of having a separate open SSH port?
We will not be doing that. Only reason being is we can keep up with the SSH standards and, of course, all security and compliance by using the open SSH instead. And as you can see, we've been trying to keep up pretty well, or we actually been doing very well keeping up with the open SSH standards. So it will not be included. It'll basically be a separate product to TCP/IP.
Thank you, Steve. John, can future VMS upgrades be done in place without reinitializing the systems disk?
John, I wish I could tell you, but I'll have to basically look. I'll have to find out about that.
John, we'll look to get back to you on that one.
Yes.
Some mission-critical customers are waiting for bare metal support to migrate their particular applications to x86. Please consider supporting bare metal in a short time.
We'll do our best. Is right now, for those customers with bare metal, you can put virtual environments on there, and you can use VMS on top of that. But as far as coming up with the actual hardware, that will be something that you can probably discuss with sales or support and just say what platforms you're looking at. The inundated amount of people that have asked for different platforms over the last several months has basically kind of overwhelmed what we could do with hardware, bare metal hardware. We've had people asking for IEEE cards, driver support for these things, and so on and so forth, which is, and network cards, different types of network cards, and so on and so forth, which has kind of overwhelmed some of the our efforts to try to get things, our software out the door in a timely manner for our customer base, which is the reason why we started looking at doing hypervisors beforehand, before we start doing bare metal. So if you actually have some bare metal that you would like to have, please let either sales or support know, and we can start coming up with a list for customers.
Yeah, I think that's wise counsel, Steve. Obviously, we're listening to our customers, as Kevin said earlier. We want to make sure we're doing the right things to get customers what they need when they need it. But again, we are rolling this out, and it's based upon priorities and number of customers looking for various things based upon their environments and what they see themselves moving forward to. Let's see. So from Ron, do you plan on any key management tools in the OpenSSH package?
Key management tools. Anything specific?
Maybe that needs more clarification. Ron, maybe if you're still on, maybe you can clarify that, or we can get back to you on that. Let's see. This is from Al. Has the development team had opportunities to do performance analysis, especially in the area of modern communications, adapters with exists for the x86 platform, 10, 40, 100 gigabyte network adapters, modern fiber channel adapters? Also comparison of operating system overhead between Alpha, IA64, and x86.
Not yet, but we will be doing that shortly. Once we have our candidate release at the end of May, and I'm sure some of you guys may know Guy Peleg and Christian Mosier. They will be helping us conduct those tests and also, figure out how the performance is on VM platforms, different VM platforms, KVM platforms, VMware platform, etc. And they'll be working with us on getting those to a place where everything looks good, and they will be doing comparisons between Alpha Itanium and, of course, x86. So that will be an ongoing task that we have right after our first candidate release, come May 31st.
Thank you. From Felix, when will the cluster options be available?
We do have quite a few cluster options, Felix, are already and available. We actually, if some of you may not have seen this previous slide, let me go back. This is the CTO's cluster that he has up and running right now. He has multiple DL380s. We have a DL580, all running different hypervisor versions. And of course, he's got this is a 6-node cluster running IPCI, basically clusters over Ethernet, clusters over IP. And he's got a lot of these set up, and they're in different LANs as well. And everything's running very, very well. Matter of fact, our CTM tests were just completed the other day with some good news. Everything looks really, really good. As far as the cluster options are concerned, pretty much all that we offer as far as clustering is concerned should be doable by the time we release. So have a look at this. You can see down below that we're having VMware. We have a couple of Red Hat instances, lots of VMware, and there's more to that. If you looked at my QA cluster, they have probably, I'd say, another 10 or 15 more on top of this. So it should be pretty solid and straightforward by the time you get it. So it's going to be good stuff. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Steve. Another question, can you link a combination of object modules from native compilers and cross compilers on the native linker?
Good question. I can't answer that right now. It's something I would have to talk to my team about.
That probably sounds like a John and team conversation.
Correct. The compiler team, yeah.
Yeah, the compiler team. With the new compilers, more questions on compilers. Will x86 provide native debugging tools?
Yes, the user mode debugger will be there for 9.2. So that should help out with any type of language that you're using. So we'll be there in 9.2.
Question about hobbyist licenses for VAX. Unfortunately, no is the answer. We've never even come out with VSI versions of VAX licenses, so we're unfortunately not going back to VAX for hobbyist licenses. Does the new TCP/IP also support Sctpip protocol?
Sctpip.
Yeah, there's also a note here. The prior versions had bugs and support was dropped.
I'm unfamiliar with the
PIP, yeah.
SMTP will be available. SNMP will be available. So if whoever that was, if you could definitely send some information to Terry, I'll take a look and see what we got.
Yeah, Paul, that would be very helpful if you could do that. Thank you. This is also a bit of a timing question from Peter. When can we get the OS release for VM environment? I think you've, Steve, addressed that. We've also addressed bare metal and how that's going to play out in the future. We don't have specific dates yet, but much of it's based on customer priority. The What details are needed concerning the VM environment? Question mark.
Details. Ultimately, we'll give you a minimum configuration of what a VM environment should include. And ultimately, that'll all be part of the installation documentation. Basically says like a minimum of memory or minimum of disk space, etc. And then it's up to you to basically make that happen. There's going to be probably a configuration. I foresee a configuration for both VBox and for VMware and for KVM. So the nice thing is that a lot of these environments are very flexible. And some of the other features we need to start looking at to some of the actual tools, the external tools that these VMs have that we're looking to add to our suite to support. Such as VM tools have a set of tools as well. And look towards also making sure that when you clone an OS, it also gets cloned, or basically you do a move, such as using some of the vSphere features. You'll be able to use that as well, but that has not been completed yet. So we're working on getting those tools and actually working with VMware to make sure that all these things play similar to what most VMware environments do, as well as KVM.
Thank you, Steve. Make sure you're comfortable. We've got several more. They're still coming in. I love it. I love it. I love the interest. Will the new Entropy Engine API be available to developers and integrated into the math and CRTL?
I believe so. I believe so.
Okay. Is Japanese support OpenVMS early in the roadmap?
Once we have 9.2 released, that will be the next project, is to get that version up and running.
Let me just add something to that. We VSI has its own engineering for the JVMS version of OpenVMS. So just to tie that along with what Steve just said. So when Steve says we're ready to go, we can engage with Japan engineering and proceed from there. So Aubrey, you will see it in the roadmap, just not quite yet. Let's see. What is the status of the 64-bit file system to follow ODS-5?
No status at this time. That is something we need to look at. We still have not come up with a solid file system that we can use to integrate into VMS. So it's been something some of our customers have asked for. So we are aware of it, and we'd like to get something done, but it just hasn't been top of priority right now. So it is still, we are still thinking about it, and we're trying to figure out what's going to be a good operating system to do, whether it's ZFS or whatever the case may be. We'd have to just figure this out. So we've got a lot of work to do on that side.
Thank you, Steve. Lauren, yes, we'll get back with you on this other point that you raised. I think this is a bit of a follow-up from Ken. Since TCP/IP won't be integrating SSH, you are removing VMS functionality where things like attributes are no longer preserved. This should be mentioned.
There will be something in our guide, installation guide, that will be talking about that. Also, too, I believe there is a conversion that can convert your config files over to OpenSSH files. And of course, the command set is very similar. So it also supports both VMS style parameters and also Linux style parameters as well. So yes, that'll all be part of the installation guide going forward.
Question, this is from Thor, will the version 9.2 be certified to be used on Nutanix? If, when can we expect certification to be finalized? I'll just comment that there have been conversations between VSI and Nutanix. Steve or Kevin, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. We know that right now that, as Terry mentioned, Nutanix, we're in discussions with them. But Nutanix, under the covers, has a lot of different tools that other types of virtual environments are different. So we have to make sure that what we do, and when we discuss this with them, is their support, what they actually do under the covers. However, it is a KVM derivative. So those are the type of things that we need to discuss with them and find out what it's all about, as well as talk to them about their what they offer and what they're going to offer for partners such as ourselves. So when we get closer to that, I'm sure that we'll make some kind of an announcement, positive or negative. But all in all, we are actively talking to them. Matter of fact, there's a meeting today at 12:30. So.
Thank you, Steve. From Twine, which Open JDK version will be available on OpenVMS x86?
Right now, it'll be the Open version 8. And I know the team is actively looking, once the C++ compiler is completed, they'll actively be looking at 11 going forward, 11 through, I know it's up to, I think it's 17 or 18. So they'll be looking at newer versions as time goes on. So the biggest thing right now is get this compiled, make sure that it works, make sure there's no gotchas. We need to run the certification suite for the OpenJDK and make sure that that also certifies itself. And then we can basically start offering the other products and getting the OpenJDK up to speed with what everybody else is doing in the Java world.
From Martin, yeah, I think we commented earlier on the status of RDB. We will plan on, with one of Steve's regular engineering meetings, plan on getting a sense for where they are and see if they are okay with us advising people on this webinar as opposed to having a statement directly from Oracle. From James, will VMware still require enterprise serial port?
One more time, please, Terry.
Yeah. Will VMware still require enterprise serial port?
Yes, for the time being, yes. But like I said before, we are looking at other options and what we can do with, say, a USB to serial adapter. So that's some of the things that we are looking into heavily because of this issue. It would be nice if VMware just said, hey, we'll give you a COM1 port for standard, and there are others, there are intermediate ones as well. But yes, right now it will require the serial port. We do want to do something with the USB, but what that is right now, I can't even go into it yet because I know there's a lot of research being done right now.
From Gerard, is it possible to have monthly updated information on how many users are porting using x86 as for the first boot? So Gerard, we do not publish related information, but you do raise a good question. So I suggest that maybe Kevin, maybe we can bring this up at the next at our next meeting, or maybe business development meeting, to talk a little bit more about what's happening with the x86 port and the types of customers that are moving over, and maybe even a little more quantifiable information. Lane has a question. Any information about third-party software support? Question, our production environment utilizes the multi-net network stack and Connex for ODBC access of RMS data files.
Mm-hmm. If our partners have basically been downloading and testing out, there's no reason why they cannot have something ready by the time of release. Like I said, having the cross compilers is pretty much a way to get there and actually start compiling against anything that needs to be transferred over to x86. So as long as they have those things available and they're part of the partner program that we have, they can easily download the latest and greatest that we produce for both field test and for even beta at this point. They should be able to get those applications up and running.
I think also it needs to be stated that we have continually added ISV partners as we get closer to the x86 full production release. And we try to stay in contact with them as much as possible. Many of you know Eddie Orcutt. Part of his responsibilities is to work with ISV partners. So that might be a good segment to have for the next webinar, to talk a little bit more about how our third-party software partners are doing with their port to x86. From Robert, obviously only one IP stack can be active at any time. Can TCP/IP 6.0 coexist on the same system disk as TCP/IP 5.7x?
I don't believe so, Robert, because of the fact that those are all part of the system directory structures, and it's PCSI does not allow us to say, hey, you want to install it in this area versus where it currently is. So no, it would have to basically be on top of. So if you wanted to just set yourself up with the development environment and apply 6.0 and just run some testing, we're going to rest assured that we're going to make sure that everything happens and happens correctly. But I understand your ideas that you would like to do, but unfortunately, it just doesn't. I wish it worked that way, but unfortunately, it doesn't. PCSI is rather limited, so it doesn't allow for a different location, because since these are all system libraries and system applications, they all have to rely on the same, be in the same location.
Here's a question about basically how to request field test versions. Steve, I think you addressed this earlier, but
yeah, I can run over it real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can either reach out to sales or you can reach out to support.
Yeah.
At any point in time.
Okay, so here's a question. Any news for Oracle client porting that we use to transmit data to Oracle Exadata?
Let's see. Yes,
I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, we've been talking to them about this, and it's something that we've brought up in conversations, but it's nothing that has been conclusive yet.
I think the whole Oracle client, the announcement that was made back in the fall of 2020 to varying degrees may have some effect on OpenVMS users. And we certainly want to encourage them, if this change in Oracle's policy that was made back in the fall of 2020 is impacting you in a serious manner, which we suspect it is for some of you, we encourage you to reach out to Oracle directly and tell them that. And because we know that several customers are, and we're trying to build up some momentum by providing them direct customer feedback and encouraging customers to go back to Oracle directly on this topic. In the meantime, obviously, we have alternatives that we would be happy to work with you with. And if you have such interest, again, send an email to info@vmssoftware.com or sales at vmssoftware.com. For 9.2, is VMware on a Dell PowerEdge server environment supported initially, or just VMware on HP DL servers?
As long as you have an Intel-based platform, okay, whether it's a Dell, whatever, and you have a KVM or VMware on it, you should be able to fire up OpenVMS. We have a Dell server. Well, I shouldn't say we. I have a Dell server that I actually have running right now with Proxmox, believe it or not, which is another derivative of KVM. And I actually have OpenVMS running on that. So this is, again, not a supported platform at this point, but it's something that I've been playing with myself. Like others, I'm a technology guy, always have been. And whatever I can do to try to make things work or try things out, that's what we do. So to answer your question, you could definitely do that with a virtual machine environment.
What about VMware installation? There will be a VM template, any plugin to support VMS.
You're talking probably about an OVA. That's a great question. We've had that discussion before, and whether it's providing an OVA or just an ISO installation, ultimately would come with everything that you needed. That's something we need to discuss. We haven't gone through that, but yes, we do. We have an OVA right now that you can import that we use internally for our testing as well. And basically it helps to alleviate some of the configuration issues going forward. So perhaps it's something we can supply, but I have to talk to my team and my project managers as well to make sure that we could do something like that. But typically you would receive it in an ISO fashion. And again, the installation guides will give you the minimum install and setup that you need for your configuration, but we'll talk and see what we can do about the OVA side of the house as well. No promises.
You heard it here first, folks. So from Alan, why should a company who has never used OpenVMS consider OpenVMS for upcoming projects? Well, I would be happy to comment on that, and if Kevin or Steve would like to chime in as well. So, Alan, I think it's very basic. The known performance of the OpenVMS operating system with its stability, its security, VSI has continued that quite simply. I think it's important that companies considering OpenVMS for new projects know that we are a well-financed company. TerraCloud is been very good to us in terms of giving us time to develop what we need to develop, and x86, we're within a breath away from having what we've been promising for quite some time. We're well financed. We've got a very strong worldwide customer base. We have all of the infrastructure, much of the infrastructure in place with our support team and other things that we're doing internally within the company to go from a startup to a small business to a medium-sized growing business. So I think those are all things to take into consideration. As Steve and Kevin have said, from a technological standpoint, we continue to look at the things that are important to customers as we hear from customers around stability, security, compliance. We have added members to our staff that are specific in this area in both security and compliance. So I think there's many good reasons why they should consider us. Kevin or Steve, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. One thing about OpenVMS, and a lot of you already know this, that's the reason why you're here, and some of you have been doing it for a long time, is what we have to offer as far as the operating system is concerned. Most of you may or may not know there are 4 modes of security within the actual kernel itself. So those 4 modes versus the 2 modes of Windows and or Linux supplies, we are far better on the security side than most people. We are also keeping up with and doing our best to keep up with a lot of the open standards that are out there right now, and we'll continue to do so. And we'll continue to keep listening to our customers and what they actually would like in the operating system, or support for virtual machines, or different virtual machine support. So the more we do, the more that we engage with our customers, the better informed we are, and we understand what customers are looking for going forward. So besides being transactional and security based, there are a lot of things, and I used to be an integrator in way back when, into the VAX and Alpha timeframe back in the 80s and 90s, as well as we still used it in my previous company at Rocket Software. We had it for System 1032, and we still had a lot of customers that were using System 1032. And because of the fact of what it's been able to do and the speed that it's been able to produce. So I'll be continuing to be here for a good amount of time in order to make sure that our customers are doing what they need to do. And as long as they want to continue to keep doing what they're doing, I'll be here. So.
Thanks, Steve. Will Perl and Python be available for version 9.2? I believe the answer is yes, but
yes.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. From Renee, you mentioned VMware Enterprise as the target hypervisor. Will VMware Standard License be supported also?
Once we figure out the COM1 support, or basically the serial support, at some point, yes. But we're still trying to figure that out. Like I said before, using a USB to serial adapter, we're going to see what we can do to get COM1 to kind of go out USB instead, which is one of my the projects that one of my teams, my base OS team, is looking into.
Will it be possible to use VAX 32-bit mode with x86 like it is possible with Alpha?
As far as the translation is concerned, no, not at this point, no.
From David, since the native BASIC compiler is still a ways off, will there be support for BASIC with a cross compiler? I think the answer to that is yes.
Yes, it's yeah. When we get to the point where we can actually release the BASIC side for the cross compiler, it was supposed to be released, but we ran into some issues with 32-bit versus 64-bit pointers. So we're working on that as well.
From Rob, is the move from TCP 5.7 to 6.0 going to be a new learning curve as it was with UCX to HP?
No. The only thing that will not be available on TCP/IP will be the SSH portion. And actually, it'll have an updated version of NTP, an updated version of DHCP. So the answer is no. The only change that you'll have to do is look into OpenSSH and the tools that will provide for you to convert over. But other than that, it is, in a nutshell, 5.7 on steroids. We've done a lot of updates, a lot of changes, and tried to keep up with some of the standards that are coming out. So the network team has done a fantastic job.
Any news for a connector to Splunk or an agent? Let me, Steve, you may want to comment on that. Let me just make a general statement. This topic is on our radar scope. We have a regular business development meeting, and various topics of this nature do get discussed and are being worked on. And we oftentimes will, in fact, not always, oftentimes, we will always reach out to at least a handful of customers, different customers, on various topics to gain your input as part of the process of our business development plans and that are specific to a particular product or service. Steve, I don't know if you want to make any more comment specific to Splunk.
If it is something that you are would like to do, just let us know. I know some of you already know Brett Cameron. He's actually done a few things, and I won't dive into it too heavily, that was actually able to push it to Splunk. So if it's something that you want to do and you would like to put logs out there and dump logs out there, let us know. and we can take that under advisement, and we can discuss that within the our open source group and see what we can get done. So if it's something you would like to do, please reach out to the info@vmssoftware.com or sales@vmssoftware.com and let us know. Okay.
From Ricky, could you provide detailed steps in creating KVM machines on common KVM hosts?
That will be available in the installation guide for 9.2.
Perfect.
Matter of fact, I believe we're also going to have it on the web as well, but I'll have to double check with the web team.
From Frederick, do you have figures regarding performance with native x86 versus existing emulators like Stromus's products?
No, nothing yet. We don't have anything of that sort. I believe when we start our performance after our candidate release, we'll actually have some statistics. I'm not sure exactly what those are, but those are things we have to plan for. So once the first candidate release is available to development and to our performance folks, we'll be starting that. And we'll basically, I'm sure we'll publish something at some point.
Here's a statement and a question from Sergey. OpenVMS traditionally plays a big role in manufacturing industry where real-time communication with different interfaces are critical. Since many of the interfaces are now using USB hub devices, what are the plans to improve OpenVMS USB support? And a comment that is important for x86 platform even more.
Mm-hmm. We are now engaging in open USB 3.0 specifications. Our team has basically put together the USB drivers for 1.1 and for 2, as well as we've been looking at the 3.0 specs, because we know there's going to be a lot of 3.0 devices out there in various flavors, whether it's storage, whether it's just simple communications. That's something that's key for us going forward. And as I mentioned before, it'd be nice if we actually had serial USB serial support as well. So it's something that we'll be looking into and improving on in versions to come. But right now, I believe the USB 1.1 and 2.0 will be available for 9.2. So look forward to additional things coming out over the next few releases, next few updates, I should say.
From Phil, for the VMware hypervisor, would there be support for the pair of virtual adapters, i.e. VMX versus E1000 network adapter?
Yes, we're working on the we call paravirtualization VIRT, okay, or virtual I/O. Those are the things that are currently in the works right now with storage first, which the driver team has been actively working on. Our network team is actively working on the VirtIO for networking. Okay, so all of those are in the works now. Will they be available for 9.2? Not really, but we're hoping with 9.2.1 or the subsequent version after that, we'll have that available. So we're probably looking at 2023 for the virtual I/O drivers. Because that basically gives us a lot of flexibility in what can be supported. It gives us another layer closer to the actual controller cards themselves. So we're looking forward to that. And the nice thing is I don't have to come up with a new driver for every card that's out there. Okay, because the VirtIO will actually help with that. Paravirtualization will help with that. So I'm most looking forward to it.
For Martin, hypervisor interface is only fully virtualized, or do you support SR IOV usage already?
It's something I can't answer right now. I have to check.
Martin, we'll get back to you on that one. Thank you for the question. Will OpenVMS be recognized by VMware as an official, quote unquote, official guest?
We would like it to be, but I'm assuming that they have certain things that we haven't discussed with them yet as far as what tools support what. So the question, your answer is yes, we would like it to be, and we will be working with them going forward, along with other vendors at some point. So yes, it's something that we want to make official, so that when you go to the VMware website, you actually see an active OpenVMS on that website as well.
I think we touched on this, but I'm not sure we answered the version question. Which version of Python is planned? I'm assuming for x86. I don't know off the top of my head.
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to find out.
We'll get back with you on that one. Just making a note here. Okay, let's see. Let's see. The cluster screen cap shows systems in VM environment. Are there any issues in mixed cluster with bare metal and titanium? That's question number one. We'll take it one at a time.
No, there's actually, we have in my QA department, and actually we're looking at putting it into our production, what we call our XVMS environment. We plan on putting these into that environment as well. The QA environment has a mixed bag of not only 841H1, but also a 2L3, all in that cluster, as well as the 9.2. So there's a huge, we have a lot of different clusters doing a lot of different things, and they all incorporate all different versions, whether it's from Alpha, Titanium, and of course x86. So yes, we do have a mixed bag, and they all play wonderfully together. So.
And here's the second part. What is response time to SAN and network I/O in comparison between the bare metal, Titanium versus VM environments? I don't think we know that, or do we?
Yeah, we don't know that yet. And that's something that the performance, we'll be working with that in the performance side.
Question on clustering. x86 nodes on a hypervisor in the same cluster with existing non-hypervisor cluster members? Question.
Yep, that can be done. Sure.
Let me, this is kind of being asked sideways here, but I want to throw in one thing about hypervisors, Steve, in that when you're running x86 OpenVMS under a hypervisor, this is not an emulated environment. You're still running x86 instructions on x86 silicon. There's just some additional management layer that can step in and pause and change and kind of manage things differently. But especially with these performance questions coming in here, that in the end of the day, we are still talking about running x86 on x86 silicon.
Thank you for making that point, Kevin, and clarifying. Next question is, support for Virtualbox absolutely out of scope, or may it come later?
No, Virtualbox, as I mentioned before, we use Virtualbox now for our development efforts. So you can use that as well. However, we don't consider it a production type scenario. So would you actually run Virtualbox as a production? That would be up to you and your management at this point. But typically we run it all the time. I even have a version on my laptop here that I've been running just to run some testing. So you can use Virtualbox if you'd like. And it does have a serial interface too. So that's a good sign. But we use it all the time for our development.
From Sean, looking at the hypervisor choices, do you see Zen as an option? My only comment with this question would be is, if there's demand for it, and if it's a strong demand from customers and current non-VSI customers who want to go to x86, we certainly would consider it. But I'll let Steve and Kevin comment.
Yeah, Zen is also another KVM derivative, so it's something that you could try out, but it's currently something we don't have now, or we basically can officially support. we'd have to reach out. We have to figure out what, as Terry mentioned, what customers are looking at, if they would like to use these things. It's something we need to discuss internally, and basically how we're going to support it.
So this is just it sounds like a statement, but Steve and Kevin, we're being given a compliment for all the great work on the open source products that are available today on our platforms. So to Brett Cameron, a shout out, and to the open source team, a shout out to them.
Yep, definitely. Thank you.
Is there a list of ISVs that will have an x86 version? Intersystems cache? Question mark. Without again, to get the absolute best answers, it's always best, of course, Greg, to go to the ISV partner. The latest from Intersystem specific to cache is that they are not planning on supporting our x86 product. Again, customer demand can change things on that. And I think we've talked about folks like Oracle, and there's some others, Applied Materials. Again, we have, I think we're over 100 ISV partners now. So probably best to check with particular ISVs that you may work with, third-party software you may work with, check with them. But we do know that several are following our progress very, very closely. Many are involved in the 9.2 beta testing. So those are all good signs. Steve or Kevin, do you want to anything to that?
You said it perfectly, Terry.
Okay. Some customers asking for Samba 4 support as Active Directory domain controller. Currently, Samba for VMS supports only standalone server and member server roles. So there's not a question in there. I didn't know if we wanted to comment on that.
If Samba 4 is, that's something we have to talk to the open source team about, where it stands. I know at one point they were looking into it, but I'm not sure how far it got. So it's something we basically have to look into, and I can get back to you at that point.
I think I'll throw in I know a little more here. Samba 4 is just massive, so that's one to probably get in touch with the team about your specific use case. I think this is the first I've heard, but I'm pretty new, asking for actually kind of domain controller type functionalities. What I tend to hear more so is multi-factor auth and other security related things, but we can't go into here, but definitely get in touch with the VSI team about what parts of Samba 4 are interesting. But that is a big request if it's full on Samba 4.
Thank you, Kevin. Steve? Let's see. In VM environment, the hypervisor uses network adapters with protocol offload engines. However, will VSI guest operating system leverage this adapter offload engine to reduce operating system overhead? Question. That was over my head.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when the VirtIO gives us a closer examination of all of these things. So I believe it bypasses that engine, but I'd have to double check. But going VirtIO with networking would be the way we can get around that, and actually offer more support. I mean, ultimately, we were doing a lot of things to the kernel recently that gives us better buffering as well. So the increased speed, the networking alone is going to basically improve 9.2. So we're hoping that with the VirtIO and the VirtIOs that starts coming out, we should be good to go. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Steve. From Andreas, MariaDB server is your focus for 9.2. What about Postgres SQL?
Good question. That's something I can't answer yet. I'll have to talk to the team. But I believe MariaDB, we're talking about MariaDB for 9.2 plus, in other words, probably 9.2.1 or subsequent releases after that. But I'd have to double check on the Postgres side. Something rings a bell and I can't remember, but I'm not going to get into depth. But I'll have to talk to the team about that.
Yeah, we certainly want to be accurate in our responses, but I do know that we've had conversations with customers about Postgres SQL for x86.
Yes.
So watch this space. We'll get back to you, Andreas. From Jan, any consideration on processor optimized numerical libraries, i.e. Intel 1 API math kernel library?
Not sure. I'd have to talk to our team, base OS team, as well as the compiler team. But I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Looking at the cloud roadmap, AWS specifically, do you foresee providing an AMI image from the marketplace, or do you think it would be still be something like an ISO image installed there?
That's a good question, and it's something that we've been discussing internally as far as having something from the marketplace. We've been looking at some of the YAML configurations. We've been actively looking at some of this stuff, but it's nothing we've come up concrete. We'll be reaching out to Amazon at some point to discuss with them the support for our operating system in that configuration. Because if some of you have already tried to do this with other obscure operating systems that don't have something within the marketplace, and you had an ISO, it makes it a little bit more difficult to try to put all these things together and get it to actually work. We're going to be working with them probably within the next 6 to 9 months to make sure that we can get something on that marketplace so that people can download. But there's a lot of things that we would like to do on top of that and support. So yes, it's on our radar, and it's something that we'll be looking forward to going down the road.
We know that there's a few questions we have not gotten to, and some questions we've answered, have been answered in one way or another that you may have asked. Let's just have one more, and then we'll look to wrap up. From Vern, any reason the VMware hot live migration of a virtual machine from one blade to another blade would not work for OpenVMS?
I don't see why not, Vern. But I can't quite quantify that at this point. I'd have to get back to you on it. I don't see why not.
I just made a note on Vern's question, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
So again, great questions. That's made up the majority of this webinar. We appreciate it. We know your genuine interest. We will endeavor to get back to some of the questions we've not been able to address as well as we'd like. We'll do our best with those answers. I would like to thank Kevin Shaw for presenting and participating in today's webinar under the title of our CEO. Kevin, it's great to have you, and I'm sure everyone welcomes further visibility from you going forward. And Steve, again, I think this is the third webinar you've been on, and you've carried the weight here. So thank you very much for the work that VSI Engineering is doing and making things keep moving forward. All the customers, I'll speak for the customers, they all appreciate that. And we finally want to thank all of you attendees to today's webinar. Without you, we wouldn't be here, and we appreciate you. And look forward to our next webinar. We don't have a specific date yet, but we will be announcing that in the near future. And of course, this information will be recorded on our website in the next 24 to 48 hours. And again, any specific issues or things that we haven't addressed, please feel free to send your questions to info@VMS Software or at sales@VMS Software, or send them directly to myself, Terry Holmes. And we appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day wherever you may be, and let's keep moving forward. And we look forward to speaking with you and participating with you in the next webinar. Thanks again, and have a great day. Take care. Bye bye.